Good evening. Well, it's a major week of political debates and we just saw Jim Chalmers and Angus Taylor go head to head. Both politicians were sharp, precise and on message. Chalmers accused Taylor of planning secret cuts to pay for a $600 billion nuclear plan, while Taylor said the Treasurer had overseen the greatest decline in living standards in Australian history. This is a cost of living crisis, with Trump's trade tariffs causing global havoc and inflation still biting. The economy is the central issue impacting every single Australian. Now, voters will decide who they trust to run the country. And even tonight, in this debate, Angus Taylor, while he performed extremely well, he struggled to nail Jim Chalmers or the Albanese government for how the standard of living has collapsed, for how energy prices are soaring despite the government in opposition promising the opposite, and for their wasteful spending. Angus Taylor and Dutton will be judged if they fail to comprehensively prosecute the case against Chalmers on these fronts. And not just tonight, where, as I said, Taylor performed very well, but in the campaign more broadly. Now, the standout moment tonight was when Ross Greenwood asked the Treasurer if he'd apologise for promising that energy prices would fall by $275. Chalmers said he takes responsibility, but he stopped short of saying sorry.
Will you look down the barrel of the camera and apologise for that? Because is that something you should do? Because, again, that was a promise that was not fulfilled.
Well, the 275 figure that you're referring to from the modelling in 2021 predated two important developments. The first one was Angus intervened to hide a big price rise before the last election. We didn't know about that when we talked about that modelling. And the second thing is there's been a major land war in Eastern Europe, which has caused a global spike in energy inflation.
In fact, Chalmers was twice asked to apologise to voters for promising a lower cost of living before the last election. And Taylor put this to him as well, but again, he didn't apologise. In return, Chalmers asked Taylor to promise that he wouldn't cut essential services.
Angus and Peter Dutton have both said the best indicator of future is what's happened in the past. Now, in their first budget, after promising no cuts to health and education, they cut $80 billion
All right, I'll go back,
out of health and education, and that's why he won't answer this question.
And this is the heart of Labor's attack against the coalition during this campaign, that it would cut health, education and Medicare. Now, another key moment tonight was when Ross Greenwood asked Angus Taylor if he didn't put enough work into his own job.
Question is, some people suggest that maybe you don't put the work in. You maybe have heard that as well. What's your own sense of that?
Well, you know, there's lots of free advice in this game.
I understand that.
And in turn, Ross Greenwood put to Jim Chalmers that he had a glass jaw.
The one thing they say is you've got a bit of a glass jaw, that you don't cop criticism well. What would you say to that?
Oh, I think over time I've learned to understand that you take the good with the bad.
Now, Trump's trade tariffs was the opening question, like it was last night. And Chalmers claimed Albanese was standing up for Australia, while he said Dutton was full of Doge sycophants. And Taylor responded by saying that he'd take on the Trump administration and that they would sort out an exemption like they had in the past.
And here I think we've got the first contrast of the debate tonight, the first choice, because we've got a Prime Minister standing up for and speaking up for Australia, and we've got an opposition leader and an opposition, which is absolutely full of these kind of doji sycophants who have hitched their wagon to American-style slogans and policies and especially cuts, which would make Australians worse off.
We've heard the first piece of nonsense from Jim tonight. Which is that we're not prepared to take on an American administration. We did when we were last in government and we will again.
The question of a recession was put on the table during the debate. Angus Taylor said that if the 4 rate cuts that Chalmers had forecast, well, if they come to pass, this would mean that Australia would be in a recession. But Chalmers argued that he expects the economy to continue to grow. To this point, we heard Angus Taylor point to GDP per capita going backwards. He called it a lost decade, with living standards falling.
GDP per capita has gone backwards for 21 months in a row under your so-called stewardship, Jim. And the result of that is our household standard of living what our incomes can buy in terms of goods and services has collapsed in an unprecedented way, 7.9% since she came into government. The buffers are gone. If you look at household budgets, they're deep into digging into their savings.
And that was the crux of the coalition argument that Angus Taylor prosecuted tonight. But Ross Greenwood pushed Taylor on spending, saying, well, what would he cut? And Taylor claimed that he'd grow the economy faster by business investment. So he said he'd grow the economy faster than spending with business investment. Greenwood also then pushed Chalmers on why he's spending $20 billion on student debt when generations before had to pay their own HECS debt. There was also a clash on how much each of their energy plans would cost.
Angus is going to the election with three policies. First of all, to increase income taxes on every Australian taxpayer. Second of all, lower wages. And thirdly, secret cuts to pay for nuclear reactors. And you can't find $600 billion to pay for those nuclear reactors without coming after Medicare, just like Peter Dutton did when he was the health minister.
The only energy plan that's going to cost $600 billion is your energy plan, Chris Bowen's energy.
Now, Angus Taylor spoke early on about how the standard of living had fallen more under the Albanese government than at any other time in history. And the cost of living crisis is the central issue on the minds of voters this campaign. But Chalmers was able to get through the debate without Taylor convincingly holding him personally responsible for this crisis. It became a contest on whose plan to help the cost of living was better, rather than what the coalition is seeking to do, which is to have the election become a referendum on the cost of living crisis.
Under Labor, we've seen groceries go up by 30%. Gas, electricity, insurance, all up by over 30%. Your homegrown inflation has had this impact. There is a better way, Jim.
Now, this contest between Angus Taylor and Jim Chalmers is important because ultimately there's nothing of more significance to voters at the moment than our economy.